All right, so I got the bracket done. You can see I just used two pieces of stock metal, steel, and both these pieces were the same width, and I had to take this one and cut it down a little bit, grind it down. It still has, it still has enough width down here to be worthwhile. I put a big old bubble gum weld on there, painted it. The thing I was talking about earlier were Heinz joints. I don't think they make them this small, and it was for lack of a better idea. So I just did this. Bob's your uncle. It's holding it. Little word to the wise. Back in the day working at Saturn, one of the problems people would have is this bolt here that mounts the lower portion of the alternator and the top. When they would bolt them, they'd tighten them too tight and it would either break this one or break that one down there. It happened a couple times, and at that time, Saturn wasn't playing. They would just say, hey, you need a motor. But obviously we're well past that. You could get it welded back on, but of course you'd have to get your car to a welder. You would more than likely need to have it off so he could weld both sides. That means the oil filter would come off. In other words, you're probably going to pull your engine to save your motor. Pull your engine, take it to them, let them weld it. So having said that, just make sure you don't tighten those down too tight when you're doing your alternator if you have to replace it. And I'm sweating like a pig today. It's a nice cool day. We had a few days of cold. And I think here in Texas, you can pretty much say that that's our winter. So on this PCB thing, you can see this one's a different color. The one I was messing with cracked. So I got me a different one. Same type. It's from the Mazda 6 Turbo. Mazda Speed. There's a Mazda Speed version you can put it on. But anyway, that's a 1/4 inch NPT. I did tap this, as silly as that may sound, but that's the reason the other one cracked. It was making its own threads as it went in, and it was just too much. So I've got this angled down this way. I'm going to put a small section of braided hose from here, and then I'm going to put this piece about right, maybe here, right in the middle, something like that. So the hose is pretty darn small that I'm going to have to make for this thing, but oh well. So that's going to go there. And then remember I was saying that it would be a bad idea to put this underneath and where, moisture and all that. Well, that's just me overthinking stuff, because actuality, there's not going to be much moisture up here at all. So yeah, it's going to go down here. I'm going to put it under here about the same location it is on the other car, and then I'll trim the hose, because now the hose isn't reaching all the way, up here where the stock port would be hanging down, so it's going to be down here. So I just need to trim it. Same size hose, same location, should be good to go. For the fuel situation, so I changed this over. I'm going for a black silver look. This is going to be crinkle coat black here just very shortly. I'm working on that now. So I got the black fitting coming off of here. This is a this is an 8AN down to a 6. So 8 to 6, and then this fitting here, I'm going to just use a 6AN straight, and I'm going to come off of this. No, actually, I'm going to use a 45. I'm going to use a 45 so that it can shoot back this way. So a 45 here. That's not tight, obviously. Here, we're going to do a straight 6AN hose end. And, of course, it's going to come over here. So this is our return, and I've got these little EFI to AN fitting adapters on both of them. They're different sizes, so if you go that route, you need to make sure you just look at both sizes on there. So this sits maybe right here, something like that. So whatever hose I need from here, I'll have another straight here. I'll need to make sure that get the hose line right. So again, just like a lot of the stuff, none of this is going to come to a fruition until I actually get the engine stat back in here. Same deal back here. So both of these hoses go into a straight -6 hose end. So as I've noted earlier, I've got the coolant situation kind of mapped out already. It's got the little dog leg coming off here to go over to the reservoir. EGR, I am going to block it off. It'll require a little bit of timing adjustment, because believe it or not, the little slipstream of exhaust that's being fed here back into your intake, going into your cylinders, theoretically, and I guess it does work to some degree. There's an argument there that it don't, and there's an argument there that it's solely for emissions. The government wants to try to take some exhaust gas and then try to retreat it, reburn it to burn it even better than when it went in through the first time. So I don't know, but in the end, I should have availability, which I'm going to touch on something here in a second. I should have availability to retard timing a few degrees if I need to help offset whatever cooling effect is lost, because the hotter the air fuel charge, the less time you're going to be able to do. It's hotter. So, so that's going to be blocked off because, I mean, I could leave this here. I truly could, and I probably will. I'll hook it up and everything. But there's no port down here to flow into this intake manifold when this thing's commanded to come open. So block off plate, you could. The only reason I'd entertain taking that off is just to make everything look cleaner. I mean, you got a big old valve sitting here. This is going to be well below the level of up here. This is going to be sticking up. I don't know. So block off plate or leave it on there. Either way, I don't have provision here for it. So this is the single overhead cam transmission I just pulled down from upstairs. I got this from a guy. This is kind of showing my age. His name was Joey Bag of Donuts, and he had a salvage yard out in Florida, I believe. Good enough guy, and I'm not trying to drag up past and stuff like that for the most part. But he gave me this to put on my race car because at the time I was campaigning a car. And long story short, that's the only reason I have it. I've owned one single overhead cam in my life, and that was over 15 years ago. And obviously with single overhead cam, it doesn't really speak to an enthusiast that much. There are people that out there try to turbo them and do stuff with them, and kudos to you, man. If that's what you got, rock on. But me personally, obviously if this had a larger engine, larger 4-cylinder, a better transmission, I have that swapped in. But all that to say, the difference is, if you don't know, and I'm assuming you do, but if you don't know, Saturn had the single overhead cam engine for the S series and the dual overhead cam engine for the S series. And the difference on the transmission, and there was a few differences from like years to years, 91, 92, 93, whatever, to later year models. But the key difference here is 5 gears, okay? The last 2 gears in the single overhead cam transmission is longer, okay? So they're not as quick. You don't go through them as quick. On a dual overhead cam engine, of course, this all buttons up the same. All the sensors are the same. The speed sensors are the same. Everything. The locations of the shifter, it's all the same. So the axles, same thing, everything. So when you're, the reason you'd like to use this, if you have a naturally aspirated engine, you could still use it, but you're not really doing that for performance. You're doing it for gas savings, because by using the single overhead cam transmission with a dual overhead cam engine, it's almost like you're putting in an overdrive gear, kind of, because when you're in 4th gear and you shift to 5th, right now, I mean, the revs stay up pretty high at 65. And of course, I'm running the little 15-inch wheels and stuff like that. If you have larger wheels, 16, 17, 18, whatever you can fit under there, it does drop your RPM down a little bit on the tachometer. But if you're going for like kind of a more truer overdrive gear, then you would swap this out. But in my situation, because it's boosted, so that I can, again, the premise is the same. I'm doing it so that if I'm in 4th gear or 5th gear, I can stay in that gear longer, exhaust that gear, and whatever power delivery I can give in that gear longer, so I don't have to shift. And I can go faster before I get into the red line. Okay, I hope that makes sense. So on this one, I do have, just like the one I have in the car currently, I have a Phantom Grip LSD in it, limited slip. It's not a limited slip per se, but I mean it's like a modification you do to it and I'm going to show you that when I get it out. But it's a modification that you do to simulate a limited slip. It's not a true limited slip. It's not a torsion. It's nothing like that. But it does turn both wheels. I mean, you can sit there while the car's off the ground, spin both front wheels, and they both turn in the same direction. So it's like having a posi track kind of, but not really. It's the poor man's limited slip. Let's look at it like that. So this one here that's in there right now, it has a street spring. Phantom Grip would sell the block and they would offer you a street spring and a strip spring. The strip spring is just a stiffer spring that's going to put more load on the spider gears. And I've heard some people say that their gears, the spider gears will get premature wear and things like that. I haven't seen that. I haven't seen it. I mean, I've had that limited slip. I have had the Phantom Grip on this car ever since it's been turboed. And I mean, that's going way back. And the thing never never had any shifting issues, never any kind of issues with the transmission, nothing. I drained the trans fluid out of this one just because I was going to pull the engine. And the transmission fluid was perfect. There was nothing in it. There was no shards, no debris, it was just nothing. So I'm thinking that people, there's stories out there for a reason. Has someone seen something like that happen to them? No doubt. It probably did happen. It might have been on a high horsepower application. It might have been on an application that wasn't even a Saturn that could really throw down some power. And that was what, did it. I don't know. But look at our power goals here. I mean, 350 horsepower, I guess, is what we're going to be at when we do the 20 pounds. That's ceiling for me. That's my goal. That's my desire. I don't want 500. I don't want 700. If I could get it, I wouldn't get it. It's just, in a front wheel drive car, it's just not an enjoyable car. Okay. I remember there was a game, I forget the name of the mobile game or the handheld game, but you could go in and it was a drag race game, and you could go in and you could program first, second, third, fourth, fifth, however many gears you had, and you could do a final drive ratio and stuff like that. And no matter how much power I had on the car that I had, if it spun out when I took off, I'd go in and drop the gears down. So when I floor it, I don't want wheel spin. I mean, you don't. If you're looking for ultimate acceleration, of course you have to know the grip of your tires. You have to know where the boost comes on at. But at any point where you have tire slippage, that's too much power. You're just sitting there. So if you want to accelerate the quickest, it won't be the most impressive audibly, and that's what times a lot of burnouts I find are just the most pointless thing to do. I mean, it's just unbelievable. But anyway, so I'm running this transmission. So I brought it down. I'm going to break it down, change out that diff, get the diff out, change out the Phantom Grip spring. So this is it. This is the original box. And you can see they got the gold check marked here because that's a street spring. And when I originally bought it, I didn't buy it to do drag racing. I bought it for better street performance. And so it'd be number 907 gold if that's what you're going for, but it's a Phantom Grip, and they're still around. You can still get them. So I ordered a second one, and that one I did put in the green spring. That's the one that's in the car now. But here's how it comes. You need these many springs in there. These are little tabs that you're going to squish it down with and lock them in. And you've got these little pins that hold these things into the block. You do remove that, and you remove the pins when you put it in, by the way. Don't leave them in there. But I've got to replace these springs here into here. And I'll have a set of gold ones after that. You can see I always put notes because, damn it, I forget stuff. That's why I have that note right there, because this stuff sits up there for so long that I just forget about, any engines I have up there. I might have blown it or I might not. Like, look here, this one here, I did blown head gasket, cylinder 1 and 4, 8.5-to-1 forged pistons. I can reuse the with rings refreshed. The stock rods, I want to discard those. They're more than likely bent. I can reuse the crank, and I just put little notes all on these things because it still has a good clutch on it. I didn't run this for very long. So, but I've got engines and stuff up there that I have one that was a 2-liter build that I did. Just 2-liter forged pistons. I think I did 9.5 or 10-to-1 and with stock rods. And that's important to know, right? Because, and guess what happened with that one? The cylinder sleeve cracked. And because that bore was too big, I guess. It was naturally aspirated. So, you know, 2-liter may be a little bit too big for the stock cylinder sleeves. But I didn't play with it past that. I decided to go turbo after that. That was many, many years ago. But so anyway, going to tear this down, change out the springs. All right, continuing on here. So transmission is separated away. You know, I kind of like doing it in the car, actually, to be honest with you. Getting the trans off. But oh well, already had it out. I may, when I go back, I may end up putting the trans in there first, like I usually do, and then just stab the engine and then work the trans up onto it from the bottom. It just, to me, it seems easier instead of pulling all this out together, putting it all back in together. Yeah. So, but with the painted engine bay, I'm about to be real careful no matter what I do. All right, so one other thing I noted too, I measured from the cylinder head flange out to this part right here, and then I measured the stock manifold at its widest point with one of the runners that come up back behind there, and I was at 9 inches there. I want to say that, if I remember right, that runner was close to touching the firewall. Of course, the padding and all that padding's coming off. I think I'm going to be okay, but sadly, the real test is going to be putting this thing in first to see if this is too wide, just from this alone. Now, let's say I'm off just a little bit, then I will go ahead and cut off till about right here, to where I still have the V part, because really all that cable does is ride right in that channel. And I was gonna make a bracket from the power brake booster over here, but that's a big long bracket. It'll be way over here, shooting over here with the bracket. Well, I'm gonna use this bolt. This hole is tapped for something, and I'm gonna make something down here on this side to where I can have the bracket right here. So that ought to solve that. But again, I'm gonna have to wait till I get that stabbed in there to figure something out, because if this is too wide, the jig's up. I'm not gonna be able to use this, which means, I guess, yeah, I won't be able to use this either, because this will go too far into the manifold. So all this might have been for nothing, but such is when you're trying to make stuff work. Now, I could have swore though, and this is the only reason I'm not stopping right now and just going with the regular manifold, I could have swore, and if I go dig up my PIC files in there, I could have swore I had this setup stabbed into an engine bay. I could have swore that. Because that alternator, I had a different bracket on there before to space it back because of this manifold, and I seem to remember that I was more worried about the alternator hitting, because it pokes out just a little bit further than the back of this manifold does, and it didn't. I kind of, for some reason, I'm remembering that, and that's just what I'm thinking of. So I don't know. Sadly, I'm gonna have to stick it in and then just go from there. But anyway, back to this. So on this one, this is the spec clutch that I put in there some time back. Now, this doesn't have a lot of miles on it at all, so I've got no problem reusing this pressure plate. It's not worn out. It was not slipping. I'll take it off and look in it for any hot spots and stuff on there. But the splines inside there look good. You know, that's on the clutch disc, and of course I'm replacing that. So, and we're going to be replacing it with this one here. This is a 4-puck ACT clutch disc, and it is sprung, part 4214125, and that's it right there. So you know, the engagement, I had one before that was a 4-puck non-sprung hub, and let me tell you, that is not a daily driver. The engagement is instant. You ever get caught in some stop and go traffic like I was in San Diego, coming down to San Diego from Temecula, and man, you got some bad spots in traffic there that really would put you to the test. So, but this one's sprung, so engagement should be, you know, it's a performance clutch, obviously. So you do have some trade-off to drivability, but it's not going to be a non-sprung type deal. So I'm going to use that clutch disc for here because I'm not sure of the power handling, but I know, you know, a lot of times the pressure plate having a real stiff setting on it, that's one thing, but you do have to have a clutch disc that has the type of engagement material and stuff like that on it. And I'm suspecting I'm going to be between 340 and 350, somewhere in there. And I think this setup right here is more than enough to take care of that. I don't believe in dropping the clutch or anything like that. I'll have to, if I do get the launch control or whatnot set up on the Det 3, then I will be able to build boost off the line, but I'm going to keep that setting relatively small, maybe 5 pounds, because axles, because race prep surface, because, you know, for a lot of reasons. And so I want to come out of the hole soft. I want to come out with some boost, but I want to come out of the hole soft enough, and then, you know, just get past the 60 foot and then pretty much let it all come on. So yeah, that's the clutch setup. I'm not going to be replacing the the clutch pressure plate. You always want to replace your throwout bearing, and then you're going to put just a light little bit of lube grease on these splines. In these kits, they actually give you some to put on there. So make sure you clean up those splines first, and then put some of that lube on there. One note here. And I'm just trying to be thorough in case I'm not trying to be Mr. Professor here, but when you take your pressure plates on and off, it's a good idea to be taking them on off even. You're going to want to loosen them just like you would tighten them in like a crosshatch pattern, a little bit at a time, because you can warp the pressure plate going on just like you can taking it off. Excuse me. If I was replacing the pressure plate, I wouldn't care so much, but I'm not. I'm reusing this one. So make sure as you take these things off, go ahead and just take them off. You know, loosen the 3 o'clock, go over to the 9 o'clock, go to the 12 o'clock, go to 6 o'clock, and just back and forth. And you'll see, I think, some of these marks on here when you tighten them, because things get kind of confusing sometimes as you're rotating or whatnot. Mark them. That way you know you tighten them. Also, on flywheel bolts especially, I think there was some Saturn enthusiasts sometime back that had a failure. Their pressure plate bolts worked out and had a pretty catastrophic failure in that. But always use some Loctite on the threads, both for the flywheel, which we're not taking off here. But if you were, go ahead and put Loctite on. And then also on these bolts here, on the pressure plate bolts, go ahead and use some Loctite. Short of that, when I get the flywheel off, this is a Fidanza lightweight flywheel. And I'm going to look at the ring that's on there. And then at minimum, I'm going to take a Roloc disc, these little abrasive discs, on a drill. And I'm just going to go around and just rough up that surface a little bit so it can seat real well. A lot of people stand by break-in periods for clutches, 500 miles. What I try to do is as I'm decelerating, like say I'm in 5th gear, I'll downshift and let the engine do most of the braking. And so when this clutch disc engages the face of the pressure plate and the flywheel, it seats that way without any accelerative power being applied. It's deceleration. It's basically I let this thing do the engine brake as much as possible from fifth down to second, and I do that for 500 miles, and then after that, I've never had a problem with it after that. And but just some guidance there. Do it if you want to. It's just something that I follow by. I think it's good practice. Well, this might have been a good thing that we did this. This is a spec clutch, okay? So what you're looking for is when you look at a worn clutch, you want to see this friction surface, if it's even, or what the condition of all this is with these little rivets that are in there. And on the surface, these things look okay. They've got some life, obviously. But look at this. This is another thing you're looking for. Look at these faces of this. See how galled out they are? And look at this. This spring is completely recessed inside there. This one's cocked off. And I'm take this off. Yeah, look at that. Look how far that thing's riding up. So I don't think this would have survived for sure. So I'm kind of glad I'm doing this. Like I said, the friction, the pads, they're good. They've got a little bit of, they look okay. But man, the dang, well, it's spec, so I don't know. ACT, I never had this problem. That one engine I got sitting over on that engine hoist, it's got an ACT on it. I'm curious if I should pull that off and just take a look. The pressure plate, fingers are not loose. They all look good. This material here, you see, when we're talking about heat spots, I mean, this is normal, but look, you see the little, looks like little zeros right there going around. That's really the only place. You don't have any deep grooving. You got a little bit of wear lines here. Looking at the face of the Fidanza, this is a new ring. I put that on when I built this engine, so it's a new ring. Like I said, it hardly has any miles on it whatsoever. And similarly, you're looking for whether this ring is worn way down to where it would necessitate replacing this ring. I guess you can get these from Fidanza. You just have to let them know what application, all that stuff. I think I shipped this one in there and let them do it. But these are little screws with nuts on the back, all of them. And all they change out, obviously, is this friction ring right here. Short of that, this all looks good. I'm just going to, like I said, hit it with a roll-lock disc. You can see where I was noting every strike as the times that I tightened it to spec. Of course, I always check it double. But short of that, this all looks okay here. This is swapping out, but you can see the difference here to the discs that we're using. This one here is a 6-puck. This is a 4-puck. This, I forget what material this was, but I don't think it was. This is centered bronze, so it's going to engage better, have a lot of better friction engagement. But yeah, you can look at those springs too. Look at the beefiness of the ACT springs compared to the spec clutch spring. I mean, there is a size difference on the wounds. So this might have been just a good find to keep. That's the part that would suck. You'd get all this back together, get on the strip, and there goes your clutch. So, but anyway, yeah, swapping out. Made a good call here. All right, there she is. Cleaned up. Man, there was a lot of clutch material. When I hit the deal with the brake clean, a lot of that clutch material is like goo, like mud almost. So it had generated a lot of clutch material off this thing. But yeah, so got it set up in there. We're going to go ahead and get it all set up on here so that when I stab the trans, once I get the diff phantom grip changed over, we'll be ready to go back up on it. All right, so they're all torque spec back. Of course, I always white dot them. This was the one when I installed it prior, and this is now. Or just mark them. It's more, you know, for me, maybe it's my age, but I get to that point where, have you ever been, like, especially when on motors, putting stuff together, there's been times where I've sat up in bed thinking, oh my gosh, did I tighten that bolt? And it's weird. So it's probably for that reason, because some of this stuff is no turn back. In other words, you get this deal in the car and you're sitting there and you're about to fire it up, and then it dawns on you, oh crap, I don't think I tightened those bolts. So if you have a system set in place that you know that you mark things and you check it when you're doing it, days later, weeks later, when you go to finally start the thing up or use it, there's no doubt in your mind. Said, nope, I know that if I was tightening bolts, especially critical ones, especially ones that are kind of no access after you get it all back together type ones, I know that when I do it, I put Loctite and I check them with paint to make sure I got them. So you can rest easy. You're going to have that doubt. Man, I don't think I did it. I don't think I did. Well, if you have a process, then you know you did. So you can relax. I want to just chat real quick. So we got the 4-puck sprung hub disc in there. This is the spec clutch pressure plate. Now, I'm going to just give you a quick history on these clutches. Back in the day when when all this first started around, Center Force clutch was the only ones that had a quote-unquote performance clutch for the S-Series when everything first got started. And really, truly, it was just a stock pressure plate painted orange. It's a Center Force color. Spec is blue, ACT's yellow, I think Clutch Masters is white. So they all like have their own clutch color, I guess. So, but they would just spray paint orange a stock pressure plate, but then upgrade the disc. And that was good for beginning out. I mean, it was okay. It held some power. It was good for 50 horse shot of nitrous, I know, because that's all we had back then, and that's what I ran back in '93. So, but as time went by, there was other companies that would try to come out with a upgrade clutch. And the first thing you saw start to change was the disc itself. Was it 4-puck, 6-puck? What type of material? Was it sprung? Was it non-sprung? But none of them really messed with designing a pressure plate, an upgraded pressure plate, except ACT. ACT was the first, and as far as I know, at that time it was the only one that came up with a redesigned pressure plate for it. And some of the concern was that if you put too strong of a pressure plate in here, it would cause some crank issues. You know, you worried about the actuation with the clutch pedal, things like that. So Spec Clutch, I know that Spec Clutch actually came up with, and they had an upgraded design of the pressure plate as well years later. So that's why you have this one here. And at one time I was sponsored by Spec Clutch. That was for the drag car that of course never came to fruition. So this is that clutch that they had made for me, or had come up, had given me with that disc. So that's why I'd used that on this build here. So now, of course, seeing what we've seen, knowing, just thinking that that pressure plate and that clutch setup may not be good enough for what I've got planned, just to be sure, I went ahead and swapped over to this disc, and I'm reusing this clutch pressure plate. But the friction modification comes in the way of, like I said, the disc and what that's all made of and whatnot. But also these fingers, these pressure plate fingers, the type of load that these things put on the disc when it's engaged. So that's important too. So just to kind of give you some feedback and some thoughts on that. So you really got two things at play here: the clutch disc itself, the material, the pucks, the type of material, and the pressure plate. Last note on this, I don't mean to treat anyone as being dumb, but the torque specs on this thing, the flywheel to the pressure plate to the flywheel, it says it's 18 foot-pounds. I went 25 just for the hell of it. Of course, with the Loctite, there's not much difference between 18 and 25. So do what you want. But I just want to let you know so you wouldn't have to go try to dig it up. It says it's 18. So we got clutch pressure plate cover assembly to the flywheel. That's 25 Newton meters, 18 foot-pounds. For those that are anal, yes, all this is going to get cleaned out too. I ran out of brake cleaner. So I can't really do anything about it right now. But that's all just clutch material debris. It's common. It happens. You just spray it all out of there. I'm going to try to spray everything back behind here so it washes down behind instead of getting down inside here where the pressure plate and stuff's at, or the clutch disc. But anyway, just in case you're thinking, man, that lazy son of a gun. So I wanted to share with y'all yesterday, and I'm going to do a lot more obviously, but I used this Harbor Freight sandblaster. I think it looks a little different now. I've had this thing for a while in preparation for doing this. I think the regulator comes with it. But this one's originally designed to use baking soda. But a friend of mine at work, he had a similar one, just like this from Harbor Freight. He said that he used sand, and if you go to Home Depot or some of the big, the construction outlets, he got some. It's called playground sand or sandbox, for sandboxes. It's a pretty light grain sand, real fine, but it does have some pebbles and stuff in there. You can't really get away from that. So if you go on YouTube and you look up this Harbor Freight sandblaster, there's a mod in there that you can do that you drill a hole out, you drill one of the bits out inside here, and it enables you then to use sand. I used this thing yesterday. Word of caution, sand will get every freaking where. I had this garage door open, and I had it originally that table sitting right there, and I'm a ways back from the car and stuff like that. Man, that sand flew all the way over toward the end of that blue toolbox, all over here. It got in my open toolbox tops. It was in my ears. It was in my eye. I mean, I had goggles. I ended up having to put like a shirt on top of my head and kind of throw it back like long hair to kind of protect. I had a face mask on with respirator because they said do it. And but on the valve cover that I'm going to do the crinkle coat, I had this old yellow one. Now on this surface here, it started to get into it a little bit, but I think if you're going to have something, if you're going to remove the paint using that on a part that you have had prior powder coated, this stuff is tough. I mean, powder coating is the way to go when you're painting stuff if you want it to last a long time. But you see I got down inside of here, I got some of that off, but it was just taking way too long. So I've got some aircraft aluminum paint stripper coming. I'm gonna that's not all that good either, but I'm hoping it's gonna really weaken this surface here so that the sandblaster has an easier time of getting through it. But this is gonna be the crinkle coat black. But man, that sand got everywhere, dude. I mean, you just can't know. But that's a good little thing to use right there. If you have an air compressor, man, I highly recommend using that thing. It really worked well. And I wasn't expecting much because it was Harbor Freight. But what I did do is I also sandblasted this strut tower brace. Now, I couldn't use this before because the Geostorm throttle body mounted so high that it hit. But this, for any of you that remember or know, there was a Saturn that the Progress group that made the coilovers and such. They had a project car that they made for the Saturn to kind of push their coilovers and some other items. This is the coilover. This is the strut tower bar that they used on that project car. It was originally like an aqua green, which was a color for the Progress group. And I had painted it black because I didn't care for that color. So that sandblaster got through the black, it got through the green, and then I, just to keep it from rusting up, I primered it yesterday, waiting for the paint color that I'm using for my engine bay to come in. So they had a couple little studs welded on here. This is the bottom. Where they had their nitrous solenoid sitting because that project car had nitrous on it. So I don't need those. I ended up cutting them off and So, but yeah, I'm going to use that strut tower bar, just kind of add up some rigidity. And of course, you know, it's what you do when you have a sport compact car, right? Getting the powder coating off. Um, so this one's from my old 95, my original turbo car. This was back in 2000, I think. Anyway, I had the valve cover powder coated, and so now I'm trying to use that little Harbor Freight sandblaster to get this paint off, and it wasn't budging. So I went ahead and got some of this. Reading the reviews, this stuff is pretty much the stuff that works. You've got a lot of other stuff out there that is pretty terrible, but this stuff right here, let me tell you something. This stuff, well, to say it stinks is just sound like I'm indicating that it's just stinky and you don't want to work, but it will blow you over. So don't breathe this stuff. Work in well ventilated area. The directions say that you need to apply it between certain temperatures, 65 and 85 degrees. Yeah, you do what you have to do. But the key is to put some plastic on it and let it set for about 30 minutes or so. What I did was I put it on, I did that, it came out. Some of it was starting to get there and some not. So man, I just gobbed it on and then just left it overnight with some plastic covering it. And this is what you get this morning. It's bubbled up quite nicely here. And then you take a scraper and you're just gonna scrape it off. You see it coming off pretty good there. And that's not the case everywhere on here, because some place here you see I'm scraping it pretty good. Use plastic, not metal. But now the sandblaster should have a pretty easy time of getting through this. Okay, because I've kind of softened it up, and you see it's coming off pretty good there. Yeah. So anyway, just some tips and stuff. I'm gonna leave this covered through the day as I go to work, and we'll get it prepped so we can get some crinkle coat black on it. What a mess this was. So I tried the sandblasting and it worked great on the other engine parts, like the brackets for the motor mounts and stuff like that. But when it came to getting the paint off of this with the powder coat, no go. Now I'm sure a regular full scale sandblaster would have worked fine, I'm sure. But I had what I had. So I had to end up using some of this Aircraft Ultra paint remover, and it bubbled it up pretty good and it weakened. And then the rest of the way, I didn't have too much success even after that with sandblasting. I had to apply that stuff like multiple times. And then you cover it with plastic and I let it set, and because of work and getting home late and stuff like that, I'd get home and didn't really feel like coming out here and messing with it, so it'd sit on there. I cannot get down deep inside both of these holes, but you're not going to see that anyway. So I ended up having to use a wire brush, and I didn't want to use metal on here. I got this, this is like this is what you would use on aluminum cylinder heads and aluminum intake manifolds. It's a white disc and it's meant for aluminum. You just still don't want to press too hard, but this is good for not causing any scoring into the aluminum. Of course, there's the green one as well. This one you would want to use on like cast iron, things like that. Stuff that's a little bit more resilient. Again, you still don't want to press too awfully hard. It's rubber, basically. And this one here is just a softer one, okay? So I've gotten it as well as I'm going to get it. So I'm gonna wash it now, and then of course get it set up for the crinkle coat finish. But yeah, so this was probably one of those projects, once I got started on it, I was kind of committed. So it just was not fun. But if you have a regular valve cover that doesn't have powder coating on it, I'm sure it'll go real smooth by doing the little sandblast deal. But this one was a challenge. All right, so wrinkle coating the valve cover. I'm good with that. I like the way it's turned out. I'm gonna, on these letters here, I'm gonna silver them up. So I'm gonna take some sandpaper on the top and just go over the top of the letters to give it like the silver look. And of course, remove all the tape and stuff like that. But again, it goes back to my thoughts on painting. So much work. Yes, the end result looks good, but man, this was something that, and it was mainly the paint removal, getting the paint off of the powder coating. Powder coating is the stuff, man. Here's one with it in the sunlight, so you can kind of see better. So yeah, on these letters, I am going to polish them up. Once I'm certain that this thing's fully dry, I'm going to just take my little Dremel with a little polishing, I don't know, it's kind of like a buffer pad, and I'm going to polish those up so they pop. And so, but outside of that, yeah, I think it looks good.